Welcome to the story of Ethan and Rachel, a tale of love, regret, and second chances. Ethan, a successful CEO, must confront his past and the mistakes that cost him everything. But when fate brings him face to face with Rachel, his ex-wife, who's carrying his child, will he find redemption or fall back into old patterns? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of the exciting twists ahead. Now let's begin. Ethan Walker sat at an elegant corner table in a high-end restaurant, the soft glow of crystal chandeliers casting a warm golden hue over the evening. His new girlfriend, Olivia, sat across from him, her laughter filling the air as she recounted a story about her latest business venture. Ethan smiled, but his mind wasn't entirely in the moment. As the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world, his life was filled with business deals, meetings, and the occasional celebration. But tonight, the air felt different. He had promised Olivia a quiet, relaxing dinner to mark the success of a major contract, a deal that would cement his company's position as an industry leader. Yet as Ethan's gaze swept over the bustling dining room, something caught his eye, a familiar face. There, at the far side of the room, was Rachel, his ex-wife. Her face was pale, framed by dark hair tied in a loose bun. She wore the plain uniform of a waitress, her movements efficient but tired, as she served drinks to a table near the window. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It had been nearly 3 years since their bitter divorce. Yet the mere sight of Rachel felt like a punch to the gut. He had pushed their memories aside, burying the pain of their separation under the weight of work and new relationships. But now, seeing her here, reality came crashing back. His eyes lingered on her, scanning her form. As his gaze moved down, a jolt of shock ran through him. Rachel was visibly pregnant. The curve of her belly was unmistakable, and for a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. His mind raced, a whirlwind of questions bombarding him. Who is the father? Was she alone? He felt an uncomfortable wave of guilt washing over him, followed by anger. Anger at her for not telling him, for keeping this secret, and anger at himself for the way their marriage had ended. Ethan? Olivia's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to find her watching him closely, a hint of concern in her eyes. He replied absent-mindedly. Are you okay? You've been staring at that woman for the past few minutes. Do you know her? Ethan shook his head, trying to mask his emotions. No, just an old acquaintance. But Olivia wasn't convinced. She studied him for a moment, sensing his unease. You sure? You look distracted. Ethan forced a smile, the tension in his chest rising. Yeah, I'm fine. Let's just enjoy dinner, okay? But as the evening progressed, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Rachel's pregnant belly. The sight of her working in such a tired, worn state gnawed at him. His mind kept returning to their past, the arguments, the betrayal, the messy divorce. It all felt unresolved, unfinished. The guilt was suffocating. Later that night, as he lay in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His thoughts kept circling back to Rachel. Why hadn't she told him? The unanswered questions seemed endless. Why is she working like this, pregnant, alone? And worse, a deep, painful feeling of regret tugged at him. He hadn't been there for her when she needed him most. And now this, Rachel, pregnant, struggling. The unresolved emotions inside Ethan swirled, a storm of confusion, guilt, and regret. Sleep eluded him. All he could do was replay the moment in his head, over and over again. The next day, Ethan found himself staring at the city skyline from his luxurious office, his mind a million miles away. He couldn't focus on the quarterly reports in front of him, nor the series of meetings lined up for the day. Rachel's face, her pregnant figure, was all he could think about. How had she ended up like this? And why hadn't she told him about the pregnancy? Desperate for answers, he picked up the phone and dialed the number of his best friend and lawyer, Ben. Ben had been his confidant through the years, from the highs of his career to the lows of his divorce. Ben, Ethan said, his voice tight, I need you to look into something for me. It's about Rachel. Ben's voice on the other end was calm but curious. What's going on, Ethan? She's pregnant, and she's working as a waitress. I need to know everything, where she's living, who's helping her. I can't just sit here and do nothing. There was a pause. Ben's tone softened. I understand. I'll start looking into it. I'll get back to you soon. Ethan hung up, his mind spinning. How could Rachel be in such a situation? She had always been so proud, so independent. The thought of her struggling with this pregnancy on her own felt like a betrayal, but also a part of him wondered if he was to blame. He had left her. He had walked away from their life together when things got tough. But now, with the baby, was it too late to fix things? Meanwhile, Rachel's close friend Jessica noticed the strain in her face as she cleaned up after a long shift. Rachel's exhaustion was palpable, and Jessica couldn't help but ask, "What's going on, Rach? You look like you haven't slept in days." Rachel sighed, rubbing her swollen belly. "It's just everything. Work, this pregnancy, and Ethan." Jessica's brow furrowed. "Ethan? The ex-husband?" Rachel nodded. "He showed up at the restaurant last night. He saw me, saw the baby. He didn't say much, but I know he's been thinking about it. He probably wants to come back into my life, but I can't let him." Jessica placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. You're strong, but you don't have to do it alone." "I don't want him in my life again," Rachel said firmly. "This baby isn't his responsibility anymore. It's mine. I'll handle it with or without him." Jessica hesitated. "Just don't shut him out completely. He might have changed. For the baby's sake, maybe it's worth considering." Rachel shook her head, her resolve unwavering. "I'll think about it, Jess, but I can't let myself get caught up in that mess again." That evening, Ethan returned to the restaurant, hoping to confront Rachel, to get some answers, to understand why she had kept him in the dark about the pregnancy. He walked in, scanning the room, and found her at the same table, taking orders. She didn't notice him at first, but when their eyes finally met, there was no warmth, no love in her gaze. Just cold, detached professionalism. Ethan took a step toward her, but she quickly walked past him, avoiding eye contact. "Rachel, we need to talk," Ethan called out, his voice firm, but Rachel ignored him. She kept moving, her back straight, her eyes set on her next task. Frustrated, Ethan followed her to the back of the restaurant. "Rachel, please, we have to talk about this, about the baby." Rachel turned to him, her face hardening. "You have no right to talk to me about this, Ethan. You left me. You chose your career, your new life over me. This isn't your business anymore." Ethan stood there, stunned, as Rachel's words hit him like a punch. The truth was undeniable. She was right. He had no right to question her decisions. But still, he couldn't shake the need to make things right. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I never should have walked away. But please, just let me help." Rachel looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with pain and unresolved anger. "You can't fix everything with an apology, Ethan. You can't fix what you broke." Ethan left the restaurant that night feeling heavier than ever before, the weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him. But deep inside, a spark of determination ignited. He had to do something. He couldn't just let her raise their child alone. He couldn't leave things like this. The days that followed were a blur for Ethan. He threw himself into his work, trying to bury the guilt that gnawed at him. But no matter how many meetings he had, how many new deals he closed, his mind always wandered back to Rachel and the unborn child he had never even known about until now. Olivia's calls began to go unanswered. Ethan ignored her texts and messages, too consumed by his own turmoil to deal with her growing frustration. Finally, Olivia confronted him one evening. "Ethan, what's going on? Why have you been avoiding me?" He ran a hand through his hair, unable to meet her gaze. "I've just got a lot on my mind. It's nothing, really." But Olivia wasn't buying it. "It's Rachel, isn't it? You're still thinking about her. What happened between you two?" Ethan closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He hadn't wanted to talk about Rachel with Olivia, but he realized that avoiding the conversation wasn't helping. "It's complicated, Olivia. I don't know how to explain it, but seeing her last night, pregnant, it just opened up so many old wounds. I don't know what to do." Olivia's expression softened, but her disappointment was clear. "Ethan, you need to figure this out, because right now it feels like you're shutting me out, and I can't be with someone who isn't fully here." Ethan felt a pang of regret, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words. That night, after Olivia left, he sat in silence. He thought about Rachel's strength, her determination to raise the child alone, and the promises he had broken. He thought about his failed marriage, his neglect, and how his ego had led him to make all the wrong choices. The next day, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He made an appointment with a therapist, determined to face his past mistakes and become the man he should have been all along. As he walked into the therapist's office, Ethan knew this was only the beginning, but it was a start, and it was the first real step toward redemption. Weeks passed, and Ethan's determination to make things right became more evident. He threw himself into therapy with a fervor he had never experienced before, confronting the layers of his past mistakes and the ways he had hurt Rachel. Each session peeled back a new layer of guilt and regret, but with each breakthrough, he felt a growing sense of responsibility for the future, not just for his career, but for the life he had abandoned with Rachel. Despite his efforts, the wound he had inflicted on her was deep, and Rachel remained distant. He couldn't erase the years of neglect and pain he had caused with a few good intentions. But Ethan wasn't ready to give up. He knew he had to prove, not just tell, Rachel that he had changed. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, Ethan drove to a nearby store and bought an assortment of baby supplies, clothes, toys, bottles, blankets. He packed them carefully into a large box and addressed it to Rachel, unsure of how she would respond, but knowing it was something he needed to do. He asked his assistant to send the package anonymously, attached to a note that simply read, "I'm here. If you ever need anything, I'm here." Days passed without any word from Rachel, and Ethan's impatience grew. He knew it wasn't enough. Sending a package, even a thoughtful one, couldn't fix what he had broken. He had to do more, something personal, something that showed he was truly committed to being a father, not just a man in the background of Rachel's life. But Rachel's walls were high. Jessica, who had been by Rachel's side through thick and thin, noticed the packages stacking up in Rachel's apartment. "You can't keep turning him away like this, Rach," Jessica urged one afternoon. "You're not doing yourself any favors by ignoring him. Maybe you should at least talk to him, see if he's serious." "I don't know, Jess," Rachel sighed, running her fingers over one of the packages. "It's so complicated. I don't want him in my life again, not after everything that's happened." "But what if he's changed? What if he really wants to be a part of this child's life?" Jessica pressed gently. Rachel hesitated, looking at the packages and then at the space where the baby would soon sleep. She knew that if she accepted Ethan back in, it wouldn't just be about her. It would be about their child. And the thought of letting him back in scared her. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. But even as she spoke, she wasn't sure if she could ever bring herself to trust him again. Ethan continued his attempts to prove himself, sending more notes of support, trying to find ways to help from a distance. Each day, his commitment deepened, not just to Rachel, but to the idea of being a father. He had made so many mistakes, but he was determined to make it right for the sake of the child they had created together. Then one day, when he least expected it, Rachel finally contacted him. It wasn't much, just a short message asking him to meet at a quiet cafe. But to Ethan, it felt like a breakthrough, a small step toward the redemption he so desperately sought. As Rachel's pregnancy entered its final stages, the physical toll on her was undeniable. The once vibrant woman who had walked away from their marriage was now worn down, both emotionally and physically. Her shifts at the restaurant had become increasingly difficult, her exhaustion showing in every move she made. She had been pushing herself too hard, and it was beginning to take a toll on her health. Jessica, ever the concerned friend, noticed the signs long before Rachel admitted it to anyone. "Rach, you need to take it easy. You're going to burn yourself out. You're carrying a baby, and you can't do this alone forever," Jessica told her one afternoon as they sat in Rachel's modest apartment, surrounded by baby items Rachel had painstakingly gathered herself. Rachel tried to brush it off, but it was clear that she was struggling. "I'll be fine, Jess. I just need to keep going a little longer." But it wasn't long before Rachel's body gave out. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, she collapsed at home, overcome with fatigue. Jessica, in a panic, called Ethan. She knew that, despite the years of estrangement, if anyone could help Rachel now, it was him. Ethan was at her side within the hour. Seeing Rachel so vulnerable, so weak, hit him harder than he expected. "You need to rest," he told her gently, his voice filled with concern. "You can't keep pushing yourself like this." "I can't stop," Rachel replied weakly, her voice tinged with both frustration and helplessness. "I have to work. I have to provide for this baby." Ethan's heart ached. This wasn't the woman he had once known. Strong, independent, determined. She was still strong, but now she was a mother-to-be, struggling to balance everything alone. "I'll take care of you," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'll help. You don't have to do this alone. You're not alone anymore." Rachel hesitated, her pride battling with her need for help. But in the end, exhaustion won out. She agreed to let him help, but only on her terms. "I don't need your charity, Ethan. But if you want to help, you can pay for my medical bills. That's all." Ethan agreed without hesitation, but as he walked away that night, he realized that his need to help wasn't born of guilt. It was born of a deep, unshakable desire to be a part of their child's life, to be there for Rachel in ways he had failed to be before. Rachel's decision to accept his help didn't mean she was ready to forgive him, but it was a step toward rebuilding some semblance of trust. And for Ethan, it was the first real sign that maybe, just maybe, he could make amends. The countdown to the baby's arrival was drawing closer, and Ethan's efforts intensified. He made sure Rachel had everything she needed, from prenatal vitamins to baby furniture. But it wasn't just about the material things. He made a conscious effort to be present in ways he hadn't been before. He visited her apartment regularly, bringing food, taking care of small tasks around the house, and offering his emotional support. Rachel remained cautious, reluctant to let him into her life too deeply. But there was a subtle shift in her behavior. She was no longer dismissive, and at times, she even allowed him to join her in small moments of conversation. Yet, a part of her held back. She didn't want to believe that things had truly changed. Not yet. One afternoon, Ethan showed up unannounced at Rachel's apartment with a small mountain of baby supplies. Rachel's first instinct was to turn him away, but as she looked at the items, the bottles, the crib, the blankets, she saw his sincerity. He wasn't doing this for himself. He was doing this because he wanted to be a father, to do what was right for their child. She reluctantly invited him in. As he entered, Ethan couldn't help but notice the nursery she had set up. The small crib, the soft, pastel-colored walls, the little clothes hanging in the closet. It was a stark reminder of everything he had missed. A knot formed in his throat as he took in the scene. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have been here. I should have been here for you, for both of you." Rachel didn't say anything at first, but her eyes softened just a little. "You can't fix the past, Ethan. All I want is for this baby to have the best life I can give him." "I want to be part of that life," he said, his voice steady but filled with raw sincerity. "I want to be a father to him. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want a chance to make things right." Rachel paused, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "If you fail me again, there will be no second chances. This baby deserves better than that." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This was his chance. He couldn't let her down again. "I won't fail you," he promised. "I swear, I won't." Rachel didn't respond immediately, but for the first time in months, Ethan saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was something, and to Ethan, it meant everything. The day Rachel went into labor, Ethan was beside himself with anticipation and nervous energy. He had never been a part of something so important, so transformative. Despite the anger and distrust that had clouded their relationship for years, this moment had the power to change everything. When Jessica called him, he was already on his way. His heart pounded as he rushed to the hospital, his thoughts racing, imagining the worst and hoping for the best. When Ethan arrived at the hospital, he found Rachel in a state of exhaustion, pain evident on her face as she gripped the hospital bed. But despite the intensity of the moment, she managed to give him a brief, exhausted smile. She had never been one to show vulnerability, but this was different. She was about to bring their child into the world, a child that would forever connect them, whether they were ready or not. Ethan stepped forward, unsure of how to act, but he was determined to be there for her, for both of them. He took her hand, trying to be a comfort, though he knew his presence couldn't undo everything they had been through. But this was their child, and that thought brought a sense of purpose, a sense of urgency to his every move. Hours passed, the tension growing thicker in the sterile hospital room. Rachel's breathing became labored, but her focus remained sharp. Ethan remained by her side, trying his best to offer support, his eyes never leaving her as she struggled through each contraction. Finally, The moment arrived. With a final push, their baby boy was born. The room was filled with the cry of a newborn, and for a moment, Ethan could do nothing but stand frozen in awe. He had never experienced anything like this before. This small, fragile being, their son, had entered the world, and in that moment, Ethan realized the gravity of his responsibility. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he held his son for the first time. His heart was an overwhelming mix of love, regret, and hope. Looking down at his son, Ethan promised silently that he would be everything this child needed him to be. He would be the father he never was to Rachel, the man he could have been all along. Rachel watched him closely, her exhaustion written in every line of her face. She had witnessed Ethan's transformation over the past few months, and for the first time, she saw the sincerity in his eyes. She could feel it, deep in her gut. This was not the same man who had walked away from their marriage. This was someone different, someone who was ready to take responsibility. "You're really here," Rachel said softly, her voice shaky but tender. Ethan nodded, unable to find the words. He could only look at her, holding their son, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter of growth, healing, and redemption. Rachel, still cautious but filled with a glimmer of hope, whispered, "We'll take it one day at a time, Ethan. But this is a good start." And with that, Ethan's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and anticipation. This was the moment that could change everything, the birth of their son and the birth of his transformation. Fatherhood brought with it a weight Ethan hadn't fully comprehended before. Holding his son for the first time had opened something in him, a deep, yearning desire to be a better man, a better father. No longer would he let pride and ambition consume him. He was ready to rebuild his life, and this time, he wasn't doing it for himself. He was doing it for his child, for Rachel. In the days following the birth, Ethan was present, unwavering in his dedication to their new family. He attended every feeding, every milestone, and made sure Rachel never felt alone in the daunting journey of motherhood. His involvement wasn't just an obligation. It was a true commitment to the child he was now responsible for. And slowly, Rachel began to see the man Ethan had become, the man he always had the potential to be. Rachel watched Ethan as he changed diapers, made late-night bottles, and reassured her during sleepless nights. There was something different in his eyes, a gentleness, a tenderness that had been absent for so long. At times, she caught herself wondering if she had been too quick to judge him, too stubborn to see that perhaps this was the man he was always meant to be. But then the old doubts crept in. Could someone change so dramatically in such a short time? Could she really trust him again? Rachel's healing was a slow process. Every time she saw Ethan interact with their son, a part of her softened. But memories of their broken marriage still lingered, and trust was something that had to be earned, not given freely. Yet as the weeks passed, the walls between them slowly began to come down, brick by brick. Jessica, ever watchful, saw the changes in both Ethan and Rachel. She had always been skeptical of Ethan's sincerity, but seeing him in action as a father left her with little room for doubt. He was trying, really trying, to make things right. But Jessica remained cautious. "I see what's happening here, Rachel," she said one evening after visiting the new family. "I see the way he's trying, and I can't help but wonder if this is the real deal. But don't forget, he's still the man who hurt you." "I know," Rachel replied softly, her eyes focused on Ethan as he played with their son. "I know, but I also know that he's not the same man he was. I don't know if I'm ready to trust him completely. I'm afraid of being hurt again." "You're doing the right thing by protecting yourself," Jessica affirmed. "But you deserve to be happy, Rach, and you deserve to have a partner who's going to stand by you, no matter what." Rachel nodded but said nothing more. She wasn't ready to make any promises, but deep down, she knew that Ethan's efforts weren't in vain. They were building something, piece by piece, a family, a future, and maybe, just maybe, a love that could survive the scars of the past. The transition into parenthood had brought new challenges. There were sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and overwhelming responsibilities. But with each passing day, Rachel and Ethan began to find their rhythm. Ethan continued to put in the work, showing up for both Rachel and their child in ways he never had before. But the journey was not without its obstacles. Balancing his high-powered career and the demands of fatherhood was no small feat. Ethan's commitment to his son and Rachel was tested time and time again as he found himself pulled in different directions, trying to prove to the world that he could be both a successful CEO and a responsible, loving father. His company's board, recognizing his shift in priorities, started to question his dedication to the job. But Ethan's new focus on empathy, ethical leadership, and his growing role as a father brought unexpected results. His employees noticed the change. His leadership became more collaborative, more compassionate, and the company began to thrive under this new direction. His success wasn't just measured in profit margins anymore. It was measured in integrity, in the way he treated people, in the way he treated Rachel. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Ethan sat down with Rachel at their kitchen table. The baby was asleep in his crib, and the two of them finally had a moment to talk. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," Ethan began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "About us, about everything we've been through. And I think it's time for us to make a decision, to really commit to each other as a family. I want to renew our vows, Rachel. I want to do it the right way, this time. I want to be your equal, not the man who failed you." Rachel looked at him, a mixture of emotions swirling in her eyes. She had come so far in her own healing, and yet she wasn't sure if she was ready for such a big step. "Ethan," she said softly, "I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. I need more time. But I do know that we're building something here, something real, and I want to keep building it with you." Ethan nodded, understanding that the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. And with that, he promised himself that he would continue to prove that he was worthy of her trust, of their son, and of the love that had always been there, waiting to be rediscovered. Months passed, and the steady rhythm of their new life together took shape. The once strained and broken relationship between Ethan and Rachel slowly blossomed into something stronger, built on the foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and unwavering dedication to their son. The changes in both of them were undeniable. Ethan had become the father he had always wanted to be, and Rachel, though still cautious, found herself trusting him more with each passing day. But the true test came when Ethan took a deep breath, gathering all the courage he had mustered in the months since their son's birth. He knew that, despite the strides they had made, there was one thing left undone. One act that would symbolize their healing, their growth, and the future they were building together. One evening, under the soft glow of the setting sun, Ethan stood before Rachel, their son in his arms. He had planned this moment carefully, wanting it to be more than just a declaration. This was about proving, once and for all, that he had transformed into the man she deserved, the man their child needed. It was about showing her, not just through words, but through action, that he was ready to walk beside her for the rest of their lives. "Rachel," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "When we first met, I never imagined that we would end up here. I never could have predicted the hurt I'd cause, or the distance I'd create between us. But I've spent every day since then trying to make things right, trying to be the man I should have been all along." Rachel's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she listened. She could feel the sincerity in his words, in the quiet but powerful way he stood before her. She saw the man who had been broken, but who now stood before her whole. She saw the father who had fought for their son's future and her forgiveness. "I've made promises before," Ethan continued, his voice unwavering. "But this time, I'm not just asking you to trust me with words. I'm asking you to trust me with my actions, with my heart, with my love. I want to renew our vows, not just as a formality, but as a symbol of everything we've been through, everything we've overcome, and everything we will continue to build together." Rachel's heart raced. This was the moment, the one she had never allowed herself to dream of. The moment when the pain of their past no longer held power over their future. She looked at their son, who was playing nearby, blissfully unaware of the gravity of the moment, and she knew deep in her soul that she was ready. Not just for forgiveness, but for the future they could now build together. A future where love, trust, and hope would be the guiding forces. "I've watched you change, Ethan," Rachel said softly, her voice filled with both awe and tenderness. I've seen the man you've become, and for the first time in a long time, I believe in us. I believe in you, and I believe in the family we are now." Ethan smiled, relief and joy flooding his chest as he heard those words, words he had longed for, but never expected to hear. He reached out and took her hands, the bond between them palpable, unspoken yet strong. And so, with their son at their feet, they stood together, not as a broken couple trying to piece themselves back together, but as two people who had rediscovered each other in the most unexpected way, through growth, struggle, forgiveness, and above all, love. The ceremony wasn't grand, nor was it a spectacle. It was simple, intimate, just the three of them, surrounded by close family and friends who had witnessed the journey they had taken. Their son, now walking and giggling, was the center of their world, a living testament to the life they had built together. The vows they exchanged were not just words. They were promises forged in the fires of their past and made new through the love they now shared. Ethan looked into Rachel's eyes as he said his vows, his voice steady and strong. "I will never again be the man who failed you. I will always be here, not just as your husband, but as your partner, your equal, and the father of our child. I will love you with everything I have, every day, for the rest of my life." Rachel's heart swelled with emotion as she replied, her voice soft but full of conviction. "I promise to love you through the good and the bad, to support you, and to stand by you as we continue to grow together. I will cherish every moment, every second of this new life we're building." The crowd around them could feel the weight of the moment, the profound shift that had taken place. This was more than just a renewal of vows. It was a celebration of redemption, of second chances, of the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. It was a testament to the belief that no matter how broken something might seem, with enough effort, faith, and love, it could be restored to something even more beautiful than before. As the ceremony ended, the guests applauded, and Ethan and Rachel shared a quiet, intimate kiss, one that sealed their commitment to each other and to their son. For the first time in a long time, Rachel felt the full weight of love and hope surrounding her, and she knew that they had come full circle. Their journey was far from over, but they were no longer weighed down by the past. They had found their way back to each other, and together they would face whatever came next, with love as their foundation. Their son, laughing joyfully in the background, was the living embodiment of their new beginning. And as they stood there, hand in hand, Ethan knew that the future, their future, was full of promise. Together, they had proven that love, forgiveness, and growth could turn even the darkest moments into something beautiful. And with that, their story continued, stronger and more united than ever before. Ethan and Rachel stood together, watching their son play joyfully in the distance, his laughter echoing through the air like a sweet melody celebrating love and hope. They had overcome challenges, faced old wounds, and now they were not just parents to a child, but two people who had rediscovered themselves through pain and struggle. Their journey had not been easy. There were times when they thought they could never stand up again, moments when love and trust seemed impossible to restore. But it was the challenges, the tears, and the perseverance that helped them realize that love is not just an emotion. It is a journey that both of them had to go through, no matter how painful or sweet it might be. Ethan had learned how to listen, how to take responsibility, and most importantly, how to love without expecting perfection. Rachel, over time, had opened her heart, no longer holding on to the fear of the past, but instead embracing a newfound trust. They had taught each other that sometimes forgiveness is not just for others, but for oneself as well. Their story was not one of perfect endings. It was a new beginning, a long road ahead. But with each step, with each change, they had shown that love, when nurtured with truth, patience, and sincerity, could overcome any obstacle. And on that long road, they would always have each other. And their son would be the living testament to the undying love they had found amid the brokenness. And so, their story continued, not in perfect harmony, but in the wholeness of love and acceptance. They had gone through the hardest of times, and now they stood strong, not only as a family, but as a proof of the power of change. They had proven that love, forgiveness, and growth could turn even the darkest moments into something beautiful. And with that, Their story continued, stronger and more united than ever before. Their lives were far from perfect, but they were perfect in their imperfection. They were a family built on second chances, a family that had risen from the ashes, ready to face whatever came next. Their love, now stronger than ever, would carry them through the future, a future full of hope, dreams, and endless possibilities. And so, Ethan and Rachel's journey ended not with an ending, but with the promise of more chapters to be written, chapters of love, hope, and a life shared together. And with that, we've reached the end of our story. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey, for following Ethan and Rachel through their struggles, growth, and ultimate redemption. Your support and attention mean the world, and we're incredibly grateful that you've spent your time with us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might appreciate it. Your likes, comments, and shares help us reach more people and continue bringing you more stories. Also, be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on all our future videos and exciting content. Once again, thank you for your time and for being part of this incredible journey. We hope to see you again soon for more stories that touch the heart, inspire change, and bring us all a little closer together. Take care, and until next time.